Today, we are talking about gun reform and the National Rifle Association with Shannon Watts. She is the founder of Momsman Action. They have launched I have to say, brutal new ad campaign against the National Rifle Association and that organization's by now well-documented history of corruption within the organization. We'll also talk to Shannon about whether President Biden has followed through on his promise of early action on gun safety measures. A little bit about Shannon quickly before I bring her in. She is the founder of Moms Demand Action, which is a grassroots movement. I don't need to tell y'all, I think most of you know who she is. They fight for public safety measures that protect people from gun violence. It's part of Everytown for Gun Safety, which is the largest gun violence prevention organization in the country. Shannon has a track record of actually changing gun laws in states across this country. She's also the author of Fight Like a Mother, and I'm bringing her now. Hi!
Hey there, how are you?
I'm well, good to see you.
Good to see you.
I thought we could start by talking about your new ad, which is smoking edgy. For folks who don't know, the National Rifle Association is being sued by the Attorney General of the State of New York, which alleges that they're guilty of fraud and abuse, corruption within the organization. And it seems to take off on some of the evidence she's uncovered in her legal filing. Would you explain to folks what's in the ad and what you're hoping to achieve by airing it?
Yeah, so, we did some polling and it shows that a lot of NRA members don't even know that the NRA is under investigation and frankly, that they are both financially and morally bankrupt, and that they're misspending their members' dues. When we look at the polling, when they find out what NRA leaders are doing, their disapproval of the organization drops by about 57%, and among gun owners generally by about 40%. So, it makes sense to educate NRA members about what's going on with the leadership of their organization. I want to be clear that most gun owners in this country are responsible, but the NRA has become such a radicalized organization because of its leaders, and because its leaders have turned the NRA essentially into their own personal piggy bank, right? When we look at their filings, we know they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on things like Italian suits from clothiers in Italy. They have spent millions of dollars on golden parachutes for their executive team. They've spent tens of millions of dollars on lawyers. That's just sort of scratching the surface. I'm not even going into their vacations in Hungary and the Bahamas. So, when this is supposed to be a nonprofit organization, right? And so when their members find out what's happening behind the scenes, it changes their opinion of the NRA. So we are putting out these ads, digital ads, television ads. My personal favorite is the one that will be on a billboard that just circles the NRA's headquarters in Virginia. And then, we expect Wayne LaPierre will have a speaking role at CPAC this year, and we'll be there on TV as well.
He's the man who runs the NRA. And the ads basically say, did you know that 10% of your dues go to help support member causes? The other stuff goes
only 10%.
Only 10%.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So, when I lived in Washington and covered the White House and Congress for years, and the NRA was this untouchable force. People used to say, Americans overwhelmingly support background checks. Why can't you get it done? Why can't they get it done in Congress? Well, the NRA isn't for it. And the red state politicians who take money from the NRA would not break with the NRA. So I'm wondering now that they're filing for bankruptcy, saying that they're moving to Texas, now that their dirty laundry is being exposed publicly, are they weakened, or what is the state of the NRA's influence with the electeds it supports?
So there are a few different facets to the answer to that question. The first is, we don't even know if they can legally declare bankruptcy. They would like to, right? And that whole idea of moving to Texas was a smokescreen the day that story came out to sort of obfuscate from the fact that they were bankrupt, right? Nothing's moving to Texas. And their charters in New York and Washington, D.C., so we don't even know that they can, right? That will all be determined in the coming weeks and months. But the reality is that they are bankrupt. That's the only real news that came out that day. But you also have to look at the landscape and how much it's changed in the last just 8 years, frankly, since I've been doing this work. If you go back to 2010, about a quarter of all Democrats in Congress had an NRA A rating, right? That used to be a badge of honor. Now it is really a scarlet letter. 0 Democrats in Congress have an A rating from the NRA. The one that did just lost, and he lost to a very right extremist, which is a whole nother issue. But Congress is starting to look more like the general public in terms of their support for gun safety. The Manchin-Toomey bill failed by a handful of the votes in the Senate in 2013. That was a bill that would have required a background check on every gun sale. I'm hoping something similar will come up in this administration in the coming, weeks. But everything has changed, and it's really made the NRA weaker than they've ever been, and we are stronger than we've ever been.
Okay, I want to come back to the NRA in a minute, but first, let's talk a little bit about the current administration. On the campaign trail, then candidate Biden promised an executive order banning the import of semi-automatic rifles. You can even still read about this on his campaign website. That hasn't happened. He's signed a lot of executive orders, but so far none related to gun safety. I'm curious, are you in touch with the White House? What are they saying? What are your thoughts on this?
We are. We've had conversations with the administration. They put out a statement recently. For example, we had spoken with Susan Rice and others on her team. We are confident that this is still a policy priority. We're only, 2 months into the administration, if that. And we are very confident and hopeful that we will see both executive actions and legislation move forward. We know that members of Congress, like our former spokeswoman, Lucy McBath, who is now a congresswoman in Georgia, are chomping at the bit and ready to put that bill forward, for example, that would close the background check loophole. It passed the House in 2018. And so there's no reason to think that kind of legislation wouldn't fly through the House. And then, the Senate would have to decide whether they were on the side of the very weakened gun lobby or the very strong gun safety movement and 93% of Americans that support stronger gun laws.
So what do you think could reasonably pass Congress in its current form? Background checks, you seem to think is feasible. Is there anything else?
Sure. I mean, the Charleston Loophole, which is a loophole in the law that allows gun sales to proceed, licensed gun sales, even if a background check hasn't cleared in 3 days. That is how the gunman got his gun in Charleston and shot 9 Black parishioners in an AME church there. So that loophole, which even could, we're not sure if that would be part of the same bill or not, but that's a loophole that could be closed. We certainly support all of the things that Joe Biden laid out, including the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And obviously, we have to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act, which contains a provision that would prevent stalkers and dating partners from having easy access to guns.
Is there a reason to believe there'd be bipartisan support for any of that other than background checks?
Absolutely. Again, if you look at the public, the Senate should support and mimic the same sort of feeling there. The question is, how strong is the gun lobby's influence still with some senators? But also, the Violence Against Women Act has been reauthorized time and again.
Yeah.
Some of these senators, like Marco Rubio, have expressed their support for these bills, but just never had a chance to vote on them because Mitch McConnell didn't allow them to get a vote.
Right. Okay, let's go back to Biden for a second. He said on the Parkland anniversary, I'm calling on Congress to enact common sense gun law reforms, including requiring background checks on all gun sales, banning assault weapons and high capacity magazines, and eliminating immunity for gun manufacturers who knowingly put weapons of war on our streets. After he said that, the press secretary, Jen Psaki, kind of walked it back, saying this is a priority for him on a personal level, but I don't have a prediction for you, meaning the press, or a preview for you on a timeline of a package. Now, I covered the White House for years. Basically, they're saying, yeah, this matters to the president, but it's not, top of our agenda at the moment. We'd like to get to it. We're not on it yet. We'll get to it. I'm curious, is this, for Moms Demand Action, is this a must-do in the first year of a Biden administration?
Absolutely. And I am confident that they are getting to that. If you look at what's on their plate, right, we have a pandemic that they have to deal with, COVID. They have to work on the economy. There's voter suppression that has to be dealt with. And again, they've only been in charge for about 2 months now. So based on the conversations we've had, based on the signals they're sending, we are confident that this is a priority in their policy platform.
Okay, so you're looking for that to happen this year. Curious, what can get done purely by executive action?
There are a lot of things actually that can get done. I mean, it wouldn't be broad or as sweeping or as permanent as what Congress could do. But for example, we talked about the background check system. You could strengthen the system by, for example, specifying a number of guns that an unlicensed dealer could sell before they became a licensed dealer. There are ways to address the market for ghost guns in this country, eliminating that market, requiring that ghost guns be treated like any other gun.
There are ones that have their serial number filed off?
Exactly. And ghost guns are really an emerging crisis in this country. We're seeing more and more crimes being committed with those guns. And then also, and this is something that's really important to remember, COVID is exacerbating America's gun violence crisis across the board, from homicides to suicides to unintentional shootings, domestic gun violence, and city gun violence. And one way to address city gun violence is to give more money to cities to have these very successful violence interruption programs, which data shows they work, right? They create relationships in their community, and they go out and they interact and they prevent gun violence before it begins.
Well, is that not by police?
That's not by police. It's by local community organizations. For example, where I live in California, we have a really effective group called Advanced Peace. And the funding for all of these programs was about $9 million. Our organization went in with other 27 million plus for those programs. Now, again, state budgets are being impacted by COVID and those numbers are shrinking, but we have to now more than ever unlock those dollars at a city level, at a state level, and at a federal level, and they could do that through executive action.
Oh, interesting. You mentioned the pandemic. Gun sales have been on the rise in the U.S. As COVID's kept us in lockdown. And 57% of Americans still say that they want stricter gun laws, but that number has fallen since 2016. The most pronounced drop, according to Gallup, is among Republicans. It's down 14% since 2019 among Republicans, the desire for stricter gun laws. Can you explain your analysis of what's happening? Why more gun sales? Why less support for stricter gun laws during this pandemic?
So a couple things. One is that the Trump administration did everything they could to make sure that everyone in America, even dangerous people, had easy access to guns during the pandemic. Everything from refusing to close the Charleston Loophole to, the ATF allowing curbside gun sales during the pandemic. And we know that hundreds of thousands of guns may have slipped through that Charleston Loophole that we were talking about earlier. So something like 50 million guns sold in the last year. And we all should be concerned because many of those were to likely first-time gun owners, and they may not know how to securely store a firearm. They may live in a state that doesn't require permitting or training or background checks. And so it's a real concern. I'll be honest with you.
A million guns sold in the last year alone.
Shannon, at least.
Do you know, is it knowable how many guns are owned by private individuals in America?
It is difficult to tell because of the unlicensed market, right? So many guns are sold by people who are not licensed gun dealers. It depends on the state you live in. We've closed that background check loophole in 22 states, but in some states, you can sell them at garage sales, you can go to a gun show, you can meet online and make the transaction in person. So, but the really interesting thing is that how many guns are owned by a small subset of gun owners, because the NRA convinced these extremists essentially that they needed an arsenal, right? They need 7 AR-15s and 16 handguns. And so a lot of that gun ownership is concentrated in a small segment of the overall gun owners. But in terms of polling, right? Sometimes it depends on the poll you're looking at. And we have seen it stay pretty steady. Around 90% of Americans support a common sense background check on every gun sale, closing that unlicensed dealer market I was just talking about. The vast majority of Americans support disarming dangerous people like domestic abusers. And they support a red flag law, which we've now passed in 19 states, which essentially allows friends and family to get a restraining order to remove guns if someone seems to be a risk to themselves or others. It's been a really effective way to stop mass shootings and suicides.
Let me ask you some questions from the audience. One is, where is this? Okay, what is the practical effect if the NRA moves to Texas? But it sounds like they're not gonna. Like that, is that up to a court to decide whether they can do it?
It is, but again, I would just argue that that's very unlikely, and it was a smokescreen. You had the governor of Texas welcoming them with open arms. They were really just trying to cloud the fact that they had just declared bankruptcy. And again, they're chartered in New York and Washington, D.C.
Are they bankrupt though? Don't they have $50 million? And so is filing bankruptcy just a strategy as opposed to a reflection of their true state?
Well, we're starting to see all of these financial records come out. And so those details are still unfolding. And obviously, Tish James and others will give us a full view of what's going on. But when we look at the money going out the door, whether it's millions of dollars in golden parachutes for executives, tens of millions of dollars for lawyers. The amount that they're spending on legal fees for a nonprofit is astounding. And then, of course, Wayne LaPierre's habit of expensive suits and vacations. So they're certainly spending more than they're bringing in from members' dues, and they're spending a lot of those members' dues. So, I would say when we look at polling and members find out how they're spending their money, those numbers sink like a stone. And here we are, 2021. The NRA is like a hot stove. You touch it, you get burned, and we want their members and members of Congress to know that.
It's such a radical change. It was this behemoth when I used to cover Washington.
Yep.
Untouchable. You just couldn't.
Some angry moms got hold of them.
You really are. Wow. Okay, I'm going to now ask you a question I get asked all the time, and maybe you'll help me with some advice on this too. Do you have advice for discussing these issues with family members who are strong gun advocates?
I do. You mentioned my book. All the proceeds go to gun violence prevention organizations. And I have a whole chapter on how to have those conversations with relatives, with family, with friends. My dad voted for Donald Trump in 2016. He was opposed to what I was doing when I started it to work on this issue. And now he wears a Momsman Action t-shirt and shows up at rallies, right? So when you come to conversations with facts, with data, some anecdotes, you'll find, I think, that you have more in common, right? We aren't anti-gun. Many of our volunteers are gun owners or their partners are gun owners. This is simply restoring responsibilities that should go along with gun rights.
Great. Shannon, you're amazing. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
People follow you and support if they want to get involved?
So momsmanaction.org is our website. You can go to our Facebook page. We have a main Facebook page and a page for every single state. We're also on Instagram and on Twitter, and I'm on Twitter at the same handle I am here, Shannon R. Watts.
The thing that I love about this, it's not a partisan issue.
Nope.
This cuts across party lines. This is
That's right.
A common sense safety issue.
Yep,
So,
and we are on the precipice of major national change, I promise. And we are getting to a point in this country where we'll finally have gun safety laws protecting all of us and saving lives. And I would ask everyone to get off the sidelines and join us.
thank you.
Thank you.